The gavel struck once, sharp as a gunshot, and the courtroom fell into silence as Judge Whittaker, a stern woman with silver hair pulled into a bun, adjusted her glasses and began the proceedings. Her voice calm but commanding as she read the case of Hayes v. Hayes, my daughter's petition for guardianship over me. Claire sat tall at the petitioner's table, her legal pads stacked with papers, her colleagues flanking her like soldiers. While Eric kept his eyes low, shifting uncomfortably as though he wished the ground would swallow him, I sat opposite with Mr. Foster, my heart hammering in my chest, Robert's letter tucked in my purse, my fingers gripping the edges of the table for strength. Claire rose to speak first, her voice polished, rehearsed, every word dripping with a practiced sympathy that made bile rise in my throat. "Your Honor," she began, "this isn't easy for me, but my mother is no longer capable of managing her affairs. She forgets her medications. She neglects basic upkeep in her home. She nearly burned down her kitchen last month. I love her, but she's a danger to herself. This guardianship is for her protection." A murmur rippled through the spectators, but I stayed still, my eyes locked on her, noting how she never once looked at me while she spoke, only at the judge, as though I were already invisible. She produced fabricated statements from a neighbor she barely knew, exaggerated tales of confusion and decline, each one more humiliating than the last. And when she finally sat down, smugness radiated from her like perfume. Judge Whittaker turned to Mr. Foster. "Counsel, your response." He rose slowly, deliberately, and smiled faintly, the kind of smile a man wears when holding an ace up his sleeve. "Your Honor, with all due respect, what my client's daughter has presented today is not evidence of incapacity. It is a story spun from greed. Allow me to show you the truth." He motioned, and the bailiff carried forward a thick folder, which Foster opened with a flourish. "First," he said, "medical records from Dr. Latham confirming Mrs. Hayes is of sound mind with no signs of dementia or cognitive decline. Second, sworn statements from multiple neighbors and her longtime physician attesting to her independence, her daily routines, her sharpness. Third, photographs and receipts disproving the so-called kitchen fire that never happened." Gasps echoed, and I saw Claire's face twitch, the first crack in her mask. Foster didn't pause. He pulled another set of documents, his voice steady and strong. "And lastly, financial records proving Mrs. Hayes has not only managed her affairs competently, but has done so with wisdom beyond reproach. For 30 years, she has maintained investments that her daughter knew nothing about, investments that now total multiple millions of dollars in land holdings and assets. This is not a woman incapable of managing her life. This is a woman whose only mistake was trusting a daughter who now seeks to strip her of her dignity." The courtroom erupted. Audible gasps, whispers, even a low whistle from the back, and Claire shot to her feet, her face blood red. "That's a lie," she shrieked, pointing at me, her composure unraveling. "She's broke. She's always been broke. She drives a junk car. She shops at thrift stores. She works at a garden, for crying out loud." Foster let her rant, then raised one calm hand. "Appearances," he said firmly, "can be deceiving. Mrs. Hayes and her late husband chose modesty to protect their privacy. But, if necessary, Your Honor, we are prepared to provide bank statements, deeds, and tax returns to prove every word." Judge Whittaker leaned forward, her gaze cutting through Claire like glass. "Miss Hayes, is it true you filed this petition without ever requesting a medical evaluation of your mother, without ever verifying her finances?" Claire stammered, her voice breaking. I just wanted what was best for her." The judge's eyes narrowed. "Or what was best for you." The silence that followed was brutal. I rose slowly, gripping the table for balance, and addressed the court, my voice trembling but clear. "Your Honor, I may be old, but I am not weak. My daughter has tried to humiliate me, to paint me as useless, all because she covets the home her father and I built. But what she doesn't understand is that this house is the least of what I have. What I value is my dignity, my independence, and the truth. And the truth is that my daughter has broken my heart. My words hung in the air, thick with grief, and I saw tears glisten in Eleanor's eyes from the gallery. The judge struck the gavel once more. "Petition denied," she declared, her voice firm. "Miss Hayes, your actions border on exploitation. Consider this your warning." Claire's face crumpled, her colleagues whispering frantically, Eric covering his face with his hand in shame. I sat down slowly, the weight of years pressing into me, but for the first time in months, I felt free. As we left the courtroom, neighbors rushed to my side, offering hugs, words of support, their pity now replaced with respect, while Claire sat frozen at her table, her perfect world collapsing. And as I stepped into the sunlight, clutching Robert's letter in my hand, I whispered, "We did it, my love." But inside, a question twisted sharp and cold. Could I ever forgive my daughter for trying to destroy me? Or had the final thread between us already snapped forever? The summons arrived on a Tuesday morning in a crisp white envelope stamped with the county court seal, and though I had known it was coming ever since Claire hissed her threat at that barbecue, my hand still trembled as I slid it open with a butter knife and read the words that declared my own daughter was petitioning for guardianship over me, citing evidence of mental decline, dangerous living conditions, and inability to manage personal affairs. My breath caught, the edges of the paper blurring as tears stung my eyes because there it was, in black and white, proof that Claire wasn't just whispering lies anymore. She was willing to drag me before a judge and strip me of my independence as if I were nothing but a doddering old fool. I sank into Robert's armchair, clutching the paper, the weight of betrayal pressing heavier than the arthritis in my bones, and for a moment I let myself cry, the kind of guttural sobs that come when the child you carried turns against you so completely, you wonder if love was ever enough. But when the tears subsided, something else rose in their place. Anger. Hot and steady, and beneath it, a calm resolve, because I knew she had overplayed her hand. The town was already buzzing from her performance at church and the barbecue, but now with court papers in the mix, people were talking louder, bolder. Eleanor came over that afternoon with a basket of muffins and whispered, "Half the town is on your side, Margaret. They've seen through her act. Don't let her scare you." Mr. Foster arrived later with a folder thick as a brick, his expression serious but his eyes gleaming with a kind of satisfaction. "She's made a mistake," he said, tapping the guardianship petition. "It opens the door for us to show everything, your health records, your finances, the trust. She wanted a public stage. She's about to get one, but it won't be the performance she expects." Over the next week, we worked tirelessly, gathering medical reports from Dr. Latham, confirming my mind was sharp and my body steady for my age, statements from neighbors attesting to my independence, and, most importantly, the financial documents proving not only that I was capable of managing my affairs, but that I had done so with a foresight Claire couldn't begin to imagine. Still, the weight of the upcoming hearing sat heavy on me, pressing down with each tick of the clock, and at night I would lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how a mother prepares herself to face her own child across a courtroom, to defend her right to exist on her own terms. The whispers in town grew louder, some sympathetic, some scandalized, and I could feel the pitying glances at the grocery store, the curious stares at church, but I held my head high, clutching Robert's letter in my purse like a shield. On the morning of the hearing, as I dressed in my best navy suit, the one I had worn to Robert's funeral, I caught my reflection in the mirror and whispered, "You're not just fighting for yourself, Margaret. You're fighting for every mother who's ever been told she's too old to matter." Eleanor drove me to the courthouse, her hands steady on mine, and when we pulled up, I saw Claire and Eric already there, Claire in a sleek black dress, her posture confident, her smile brittle but determined, flanked by two colleagues from her firm. She looked at me with a mixture of disdain and triumph, as if she had already won, and I felt a pang in my chest, not from fear, but from the bitter realization that the little girl who once clung to my hand in crowded places was now the woman trying to erase me. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with spectators, neighbors, church members, even the pastor, drawn by the drama of a daughter dragging her mother to court. And as I took my seat beside Mr. Foster, I felt their eyes on me, some filled with pity, others with curiosity, but I straightened my back and lifted my chin because I knew that before this day was over, they would see me not as a frail old woman, but a mother who still had fight left in her veins and a secret that would turn the entire story upside down. It all came to a head at Claire's 4th of July barbecue, a gathering she invited half the neighborhood to, the kind of flashy event she loved to host in her cramped townhouse to show off her new grill and her curated patio decor. But this time, she had another agenda. And I knew it the moment I walked through the gate with my potato salad and saw the smirk on her face. "Everyone," she announced, her voice carrying over the chatter and the sizzle of hot dogs, "I want to thank you all for coming, and I especially want to thank my mother for being here, even though she's been struggling lately." My breath caught in my throat, and I froze in place as she went on, her tone dripping with false concern. "It's been so hard watching her decline. She forgets her meds, leaves the stove on, even wandered into the yard last week, confused about what day it was. Eric and I are doing our best, but it's becoming clear she can't live alone much longer." A hush spread across the patio, the clink of glasses pausing, eyes turning toward me, some pitying, some skeptical, but all of them watching, and I realized she was trying to submit her narrative right there in front of witnesses. Margaret Hayes, the frail old widow, incapable of caring for herself. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears, but I forced my spine straight and set the salad bowl down on the table with steady hands. "That's not true," I said firmly, my voice cutting across the murmurs. "I take my medications every morning, I haven't left the stove on in my life, and the only thing I was confused about last week was why my daughter keeps lying about me." Gasps rippled through the guests, and Claire's face flushed crimson, her smile faltering for the first time. "Mom," she hissed, stepping closer, "don't embarrass yourself." But I didn't stop. Not this time. "No, Claire, the embarrassment isn't mine. It's yours. You've been spreading lies about me for months, trying to paint me as weak so you can take my home. You've whispered to neighbors, humiliated me at church, and now you're parading me in front of your friends like some fragile exhibit. Well, let me tell you something, my dear. I am not fragile, and I am not for sale." Silence fell over the yard, broken only by the crackle of the grill, and I saw Eric's face pale, his hand twitching as though he wanted to reach for his wife but thought better of it. Claire's jaw clenched, and she leaned in close, so only I could hear her next words, venom dripping from every syllable. "You think you've won something by making a scene? You haven't seen anything yet. If you won't step aside, I'll take you down legally. The guardianship papers are ready, and I'll file them this week." She straightened, plastered on a brittle smile, and turned back to her guests as if nothing had happened. But I saw the flicker of unease in her eyes when she noticed Eleanor standing at the edge of the patio, arms crossed, her expression grim. My loyal friend had witnessed the whole exchange, and I knew she would carry the truth back through the town like wildfire. I stayed only long enough to avoid creating more gossip, then excused myself and drove home under the booming fireworks, each explosion lighting up the sky like a warning of the battle to come. That night, I spread Robert's letter and Mr. Foster's trust papers across my kitchen table, the glow of the lamp illuminating every signature, every notarized seal, and I whispered to myself, if she wants to drag me into court, then court is where I'll show her who she's dealing with. My fear was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but it no longer ruled me. Because for the first time since this nightmare began, I knew I wasn't just defending myself. I was preparing to strike back. And Claire had no idea that the woman she thought was powerless was about to reveal the kind of strength money can't buy. The strength of truth, of dignity, of a mother who refuses to be erased. The very next morning, before the shame of Claire's public betrayal could harden into despair, I called Mr. Foster and told him I was ready. Ready to do whatever it took to protect what Robert and I had built and to show my daughter that her greed would not be rewarded. And by that afternoon, I was sitting in his office downtown, my cedar chest, papers stacked neatly in a leather tote that felt heavier than bricks. not because of their weight, but because of the decades of secrets they carried. Mr. Foster spread the documents across his polished desk, adjusting his glasses, and when his eyes landed on the deed to the farmland, he let out a low whistle. "Mrs. Hayes, do you realize what you're holding here? This land is valued at nearly $4 million with the current development interest. Developers would line up around the block to bid for it." I nodded, my hands clasped tight in my lap, the weight of those words pressing against the grief I still carried for Robert. Because he had been the one to insist we buy that land. Scraping together pennies from my teaching salary and his mechanic's wages, and now it was the lifeline that could save me from my daughter's betrayal. "I want it in a trust," I said firmly, surprising even myself with the strength in my voice. "My name, my control, untouchable. Claire cannot know about it, not until the time is right." Mr. Foster leaned back in his chair, studying me with new respect. "You're planning something, aren't you?" I met his gaze, feeling the first flicker of power stir inside me again. She humiliated me in front of my community, painted me as weak. If she wants to play this in public, then when the time comes, I'll let her see exactly how weak I am not. He nodded slowly, understanding. We spent the next 2 hours signing papers, drafting amendments to my will, securing protections that meant no court could declare me incompetent without a mountain of medical evidence. And by the time I left his office, clutching the notarized trust papers, I felt lighter than I had in months, as though the very act of taking control had peeled away some of the shame Claire had heaped on me. Still, I knew she wouldn't stop. Her hunger for my house was too great. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the walls of my living room in golden light, I opened the cedar chest again and pulled out a smaller envelope. Robert's letter, written in his scrawling hand the year before he died, reminding me that if Claire ever turned against me, I had to protect myself without guilt. "You gave her everything you could, Margaret," he had written. "If she chooses greed, you cannot let her take your soul with it." I pressed the letter to my chest, tears spilling down my cheeks, and whispered into the quiet house, "I won't let you down, Robert." Over the next week, I kept my movements quiet, discreet. I continued to clip coupons, to drive my rusty sedan to the grocery store, to wear the same old sweater Claire always mocked, because I wanted her to keep believing the illusion that I was small, powerless, ready to topple over at the first shove. But behind closed doors, I was preparing, consulting with Mr. Foster, meeting with developers in secret, and even speaking with Eleanor about how to handle the inevitable storm Claire would bring. And the storm did come, exactly as I expected. On a Friday evening when Claire showed up again, this time with legal documents in her hand, guardianship papers she had drafted with one of her colleagues at the firm, papers that, if filed, would begin the process of declaring me incompetent. She slapped them on the coffee table with a smug smile and said, "Mom, this is for your own good. Sign it now and we can avoid a messy court battle." My hands trembled as I picked them up, but inside I was calm. Because for the first time in months, I knew I held cards she didn't even realize existed. I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "Claire, you've underestimated me, and very soon you're going to learn just how much." She laughed, dismissing my words as the rant of a frail old woman. But as she walked out that night, papers left unsigned, I knew the moment was fast approaching when her cruel little game would collapse under the weight of the truth. The public humiliation came on a Sunday afternoon, a day that used to be sacred in our family, the kind of day when Robert and I would host barbecues and Claire, as a little girl, would run barefoot in the yard chasing fireflies. But now those memories felt like ghosts mocking me as I sat quietly at the back of St. Matthew's Church during the weekly community luncheon, a potluck where half of the town came together. And Claire chose that moment, of all places, in front of neighbors, friends, and even the pastor, to strike. She stood near the buffet table, her plate balanced in one hand, her voice loud enough to carry, and said to Mrs. Parker, the elderly widow who sat beside me, I just don't know what to do with Mom anymore. She's so forgetful, she nearly set the stove on fire last week, and she refuses to move somewhere safe. I swear I lie awake at night terrified she'll fall down those stairs and no one will find her until it's too late. Heads turned, forks paused midair, and I felt every eye shift toward me. Some filled with pity, others with that judgmental curiosity small towns can never quite hide. My face burned, my heart pounded, and I wanted to shout that she was lying, that I was still capable, but my throat locked, frozen by the betrayal of my own daughter painting me as incompetent in the place where I had once felt community and belonging. It's so hard, Claire continued, shaking her head with practiced sorrow. Being an only child and having to carry the burden of making sure your mother doesn't hurt herself. Eric and I have talked, and honestly, if she doesn't make the responsible choice soon, we might have to get the courts involved. The words dropped like stones into the silence, and I saw Mrs. Parker's eyes widen in shock. Reverend Mitchell frowned slightly, and Eleanor, bless her, shoot to her feet with a fierceness I had never seen before. "That's not true," she snapped, her voice cutting through the air like a bell. "Margaret is sharper than most people half her age. Don't you dare stand here and slander your own mother to strangers." Claire flushed, her lips tightening, but she covered it quickly with a brittle laugh. "I'm not slandering Eleanor. I'm just being honest. Someone has to look out for her since she clearly can't look out for herself." I sat frozen, torn between gratitude for Eleanor's defense and the suffocating shame that my daughter had dragged my dignity into the open like dirty laundry for the whole town to gawk at. The whispers began almost instantly, little ripples of speculation spreading across the room, and I could feel the narrative slipping from my hands. Margaret Hayes, the frail old widow, too stubborn to admit she was declining. I forced myself to stand, my knees wobbling, and though my voice trembled, I managed to say, "I can look out for myself, Claire. I always have." But she only smiled, a condescending, patronizing smile, and patted my shoulder as if I were a confused child. "Of course, Mom. Of course you can." The humiliation was complete, and I left early, my appetite gone, my pride shattered, driving home with tears streaking my cheeks and the weight of the town's eyes still burning into me. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the cedar chest open. The documents spread before me like weapons waiting to be drawn. Property deeds, investment papers, bank statements. And for the first time in years, I realized I wasn't just fighting to keep my house. I was fighting for my name, my independence, my very right to exist as more than an obstacle in my daughter's path. And as I shuffled through the papers, my hands trembling less with age and more with resolve, I whispered to Robert's photograph, "She wants a war in public? Then that's exactly where I'll show her who she's dealing with." The confrontation came sooner than I expected, though in truth I think I had been bracing for it since the night Claire first demanded my house. Because just 3 days later, she barged through my front door without knocking, her 2 children trailing behind her with iPads in hand, and Eric following like a shadow, and before I could even set down the laundry basket I was carrying, she announced, "Mom, I've scheduled tours for you this week. 3 different senior living communities. You'll thank me later when you realize how much easier your life will be." My hands went numb, the basket slipped, and socks scattered across the hardwood floor, but she didn't even pause to notice. Her voice had that clipped efficiency I used to admire when she was a driven young woman chasing her law degree, but now it rang hollow, a rehearsed sales pitch. And the way she walked around my house, opening curtains, tugging at the worn drapes, and shaking her head at the dust, made me feel like an intruder in the very place where I had poured my life's love. "Claire, stop this nonsense," I tried, forcing my voice to stay calm, though I felt heat rising in my chest. "I'm not going anywhere. This is my home." She turned sharply, her hair catching the light, her eyes flashing with the kind of irritation children usually reserve for stubborn toddlers. "Your home? Mom, this place is falling apart. You can't keep up with it. The taxes are insane, the yard is overgrown, and look at you. You shouldn't even be carrying laundry up and down the stairs at your age. What happens if you fall? Who's going to be there for you then? Me? I have a career. I have kids. I have a life. I can't keep running over here every time you forget to take your pills or can't figure out the thermostat." The cruelty wasn't just in her words. It was in her tone, dismissive, impatient, as if the woman who raised her, who wiped her nose and cooked her meals and sacrificed every penny to send her to college, was now little more than a burden weighing her down. I wanted to shout back that I was still capable, that I had been doing just fine before she decided to interfere, but Eric's eyes caught mine, hesitant, guilty, almost apologetic, and I realized he knew this had gone too far, yet he lacked the courage to stop her. "Claire," I said, my voice trembling now, "why are you really doing this? Because don't you dare pretend this is about my well-being. This is about the house, isn't it? You want this place for yourself." For the first time, she faltered, her lips parting, her face flushing, and then she snapped back. "Of course I want it. Why shouldn't I? You can't live here forever. It's wasted on you. Eric and I could renovate it, build equity, finally give the kids their own rooms instead of cramming them into that townhouse. This is the natural order of things, Mom. You step aside and I step up." Those words knocked the breath out of me, because in them I heard not a daughter caring for her mother, but a vulture circling something she thought was already dead. My knees buckled, and I sat down heavily in Robert's old armchair, clutching the worn fabric as though it could anchor me. The children glanced up, briefly, then went back to their screens, blissfully unaware that their mother was dismantling her grandmother's dignity in front of them. "Claire," I whispered, feeling my throat tighten, "I am not dead yet, and until I am, this house is mine." The silence that followed was sharp as glass, and then she laughed, a short, bitter laugh that sliced through the room. "We'll see about that," she said, grabbing her purse. She herded the kids out, Eric trailing, but not before giving me a look that seemed to say, "I'm sorry, but I won't stop her." The door slammed, and the echo reverberated through the house like a final warning shot. My hand shook as I reached for the phone. I dialed Eleanor again, and when she answered, my voice broke. "She's going to try to take me down, Eleanor. She's already acting like the house is hers." My neighbor's gasp was sharp. "Margaret, you can't let her. You hear me? You're stronger than this. You've worked your whole life for that home. Don't let her bully you out of it." Her words steadied me, but only just. That night, as I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly overhead, I realized that Claire had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. She no longer saw me as her mother. She saw me as a hurdle, an inconvenient old woman standing between her and a dream she hadn't earned. And in that realization, something inside me hardened. If she wanted a war over my life, my home, my dignity, then a war she would get. What she didn't know, and what I would soon reveal, was that she had chosen the wrong woman to underestimate. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute, because every time I closed my eyes, I saw Claire's face, her jaw tight, her eyes full of entitlement, her lips curled in disdain, as if I were no longer her mother, but an obstacle in her way. I sat in my recliner until dawn, listening to the ticking of the old wall clock that Robert had fixed years ago, each tick sounding like a countdown to some inevitable war between us. And by the time the first rays of light hit the lace curtains, I had already decided I would not play the weak old woman she imagined me to be. I shuffled into the kitchen, poured myself a cup of coffee, and whispered to the framed photograph of Robert on the counter. "She thinks she can take what we built. She thinks I'm too frail to fight back. But you always told me, Margaret, dignity is the last thing you give away." My chest ached, not just from the lingering tightness of my heart condition, but from the weight of betrayal pressing down on me, heavier than any illness. Later that morning, Mr. Foster called back. He had been my attorney since Robert's death, a man with kind eyes hidden behind steel-rimmed glasses, and his voice carried both sympathy and steel. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, "I've reviewed your daughter's threats, and while she has no immediate legal power to take the house, if she tries to claim you're incompetent or pushes guardianship papers through the courts, you could be at risk. It happens more than you believe." His words sent a chill through me, because I had read stories in the local paper of seniors stripped of their homes and savings by their own children under the guise of protecting them. Could Claire really sink that low? The girl I had spoon-fed soup when she was sick? The girl whose prom dress I had sewn with bleeding fingers late into the night? Yes, I thought bitterly. She already had. She had already looked me in the eyes and told me I didn't belong in my own house. Mr. Foster reminded me that the farmland we had invested in 30 years ago was no longer worthless dirt, but prime real estate being scouted by developers. And with that land, I had more leverage than Claire could ever imagine. He suggested I prepare 2 moves. First, update my will immediately, cutting Claire out until she proved she could treat me with respect. And second, place the farmland into a trust with my name, making it untouchable by anyone but me. "We can do this quietly, Mrs. Hayes," he said, "but you'll need to be strong. If your daughter thinks she has the upper hand, she'll press harder. She may even try to humiliate you in public to force compliance." I laughed bitterly, a sound that didn't feel like it came from me. She already did, Mr. Foster, last night in my own living room. After hanging up, I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the kitchen window and watched the neighborhood children ride their bikes in the street. Their laughter drifted in the air like an echo of the life I used to know, when Claire was their age and I still believed motherhood guaranteed loyalty. But now, with my heart thudding painfully in my chest, I realized I would need allies. So I called my oldest friend, Eleanor, the neighbor who had shared pies over fences with me for decades. When she answered, I tried to sound casual, but my voice cracked. "Eleanor, have you noticed Claire around lately? Has she said anything?" There was a pause, heavy and hesitant. "Margaret, I didn't want to upset you, but yes, she's been talking to the Johnsons down the street, asking about senior facilities. She made it sound like you were declining." Declining? The word stung worse than poison. My daughter had already begun planting seeds of incompetence in the neighborhood, tarnishing my name before I could defend myself. Eleanor must have heard my silence because her voice softened. "Don't you worry, dear. I know the truth. Anyone who knows you knows you're as sharp as a tack." I thanked her, but as I hung up, my knees buckled and I sat at the kitchen table with my head in my hands. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about my reputation, my identity, my very autonomy. Claire wasn't trying to help me. She was building a case against me, step by careful step. And I realized in that moment that if I didn't act quickly, the world would see me through her lies before they ever saw me through my truth. That night, as I sat under the yellow glow of my porch light, I made a vow to Robert's memory, to the life we had built, and to myself. I would not be erased. My daughter thought she could strip me of my home, my independence, and my dignity, but she was about to learn that the mother she had underestimated still had fire left in her veins and secrets that would burn through every scheme she thought she had so cleverly built. The sound of my daughter's voice cut sharper than any slap, sharper than any insult I had ever endured in my 70 years of life, because it came laced with the kind of venom only family can deliver. "You don't belong in that house anymore, Mom. It's too big for you. It's mine now." Those words didn't just sting. They hollowed me out, left me standing there in the middle of my own living room, surrounded by furniture I had dusted with my hands for decades, photographs I had hung proudly, and memories I thought were sacred, now treated like clutter by the very child I had carried inside me for 9 months. I'm telling you this story because I need you to understand that betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from the people whose tiny hands once reached for your face with innocent love. I'm 70 years old. My name is Margaret Hayes. And tonight I want you to listen closely, because what my daughter tried to do to me could happen to anyone. And I'll warn you now, What I'm about to reveal is going to break your heart before it heals it. If you're watching, please subscribe, comment, and share where you're listening from, because I know too many mothers and grandmothers are suffering in silence just like I did, and it's time we speak out. I had lived in that Cape Cod-style house in a small Massachusetts town for over 40 years. A modest place with peeling white paint and a porch where I raised my daughter Claire, where I read bedtime stories under a patchwork quilt, where every creak of the floorboards held echoes of my late husband's laughter. But Claire didn't see it that way. Not anymore. To her, it was nothing more than a prize, a property she could liquidate, a shortcut to the glamorous suburban lifestyle she thought she deserved. I can still see her standing there in my living room on that spring afternoon, her arms crossed, her manicured nails tapping against her designer purse, as if my hesitation was an inconvenience to her busy life. "Mom, you don't even need this space. You live like a hermit. The taxes alone are eating you alive. Sell it. Move into assisted living where you belong, and let me and Eric finally build a proper home for the kids," she said, with the tone of a real estate agent, not a daughter speaking to her mother. Eric, my son-in-law, hovered behind her with his head down, silent as usual. The same way he was silent when she raised her voice, silent when she spoke about me as if I were already gone, silent when I reached out to him with pleading eyes that begged for an ounce of decency. I wanted to scream, to remind them of the nights I worked double shifts at the diner so Claire could have ballet lessons, of the winters I walked through snow with holes in my boots just to make sure she had Christmas presents under the tree, of the way I held her for hours when she was 6 years old and terrified of thunderstorms. But the words caught in my throat, because it's a particular kind of agony to realize your sacrifices are not just forgotten, they're being trampled on. And then she said the line that will haunt me until my last breath. "You're old, Mom. You're weak. You can't take care of a house like this anymore. If you don't sign it over, I'll make sure you end up in a place where someone else makes your decisions for you." That threat, casual and sharp, sliced through me worse than any slap ever could. I remember the room spinning, the photos on the mantle, Claire at her high school graduation, Claire holding her newborn son in the hospital, suddenly feeling like cruel jokes staring back at me. How had my own daughter come to this? How had the baby I once rocked to sleep grown into a woman capable of cornering me in my own home and speaking about me as if I were a burden to be managed? And maybe the cruelest part of all was that she wasn't entirely wrong. My hands ached with arthritis, my back stiffened with every morning sun, my heart struggled more than it once did. I had hidden the hospital visits, the medications, the shortness of breath, because I didn't want her pity. But Claire didn't offer pity. She offered conquest. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that this house she coveted so much wasn't the only thing in my possession. I wasn't just a retired school teacher with a pension barely scraping by. Decades ago, before anyone thought the land outside our sleepy town would be worth anything, my late husband and I had purchased acres of farmland as an investment. To everyone, it looked like a foolish hobby of my husband's, a plot of dirt off the highway. But times changed, development spread, and those forgotten fields became a gold mine. I had kept it hidden, locked away in documents tucked into a cedar chest, because my husband and I agreed, wealth corrupts and appearances protect. So I wore my thrift store sweaters, drove my rusty sedan, and clipped coupons at the grocery store, while in reality I was sitting on land now worth millions. And there I was, standing in my living room, my daughter glaring at me with impatience, believing she was about to strip me of the only thing I had left. She thought she had cornered me. She thought I was powerless. But she had no idea that the woman she was trying to discard like an old coat had already mapped out the first steps of her downfall. And that night, after she stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled, I picked up the phone and made a call I had prayed I would never need to make. "Mr. Foster?" I said when my attorney's calm voice answered. It's Margaret. We're going to have to put those contingency papers into motion. My daughter's trying to take the house. It's time to show her the truth. As I hung up, I sat in the silence of my home, tears sliding down my cheeks, not from sadness anymore, but from the cold, unyielding realization that the child I had sacrificed everything for had chosen greed over love. And I knew then, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that my story wasn't just about losing a daughter. It was about reclaiming my dignity, piece by painful piece.